Welcome back to Up Front and back to the debate over changes planned for the Government Accountability Board. Assembly Minority Leader Peter Barca accused Republicans of trying to turn the state's watchdogs into lapdogs. He said a partisan model would open the door for corruption. GAB Director Kevin Kennedy is also defending the agency, and Kevin Kennedy joins us now on Up Front. It's good to have you back on the program.
Thank you.
Do you feel this is a fait accompli at this point? The GAB will be no more in a very short period of time?
Well, it's hard to tell. It's clearly, it's been talked about, but it was just this week that we see for the first time the draft, and quite frankly, the draft has a lot of technical problems in it that are going to have to get ironed out. And it's really a bad time to do this. If they wanted to do this, it should have been in place by now. We're right in the middle of a presidential election cycle. We've already started making arrangements to have the committee that picks the people that appear on the presidential ballot in April. We've started to make those arrangements. Clerks, we're going to roll out photo ID in February statewide for the first time with that Supreme Court election. There's a lot of challenges.
Do you think changing right now runs the risk of making our elections less than credible?
I think it's asking for a lot of potential problems in administration. You've had a very strong leadership in elections. We've been nationally recognized. Our local election officials are very comfortable with the people who are running the show and providing them with the support, and you're going to see a change in the management and the governing structure right in the middle of that.
You've been on this program a number of times, and we've had this discussion a number of times about whether the agency is truly nonpartisan. And I want to have you again, for viewers who are watching today, address these claims from Republicans that the GAB simply isn't nonpartisan, that it's gone too far. And they cite internal emails from former attorneys on the staff, like Shane Falk, who they say, he's talking about political consequences of decisions that are made. Or they talk about Gerald Nickel, who's the retired judge, who's chair of the board, talking about how most judges he knows were appalled by the Supreme Court decision that ended the John Doe probe. What do you say to people who say those don't sound like terribly nonpartisan comments?
Well, first of all, I think you're right. They're not they aren't really partisan comments either. What they are simply opinions about issues. I mean, Shane Falk is a staff member who makes recommendations, who does what he's told to do in terms of the investigations. People have backgrounds, but nothing there said, hey, we're out to get Republicans or Democrats are the greatest thing since sliced bread. What it said was, and you look at this every time you make a decision, what are the consequences if we do these things? Judge Nichols' comments about the Supreme Court decision, a lot of people disagreed with that at the national level. A lot of people disagreed with it at the local level. He's simply acknowledging that fact. There's a lot of people who supported it as well.
He said he was okay with the way early morning raids were conducted as part of the investigation. Were you okay with that when you found out about what happened?
Well, keep in mind, this is part of a storyline that's trying to be developed that really is not relevant here. Search warrants are always conducted in the morning. The GAB had no role in those search warrants. And I think it was an unfair question to ask me and to ask Judge Nichols, because we aren't the professional law enforcement people that did those search warrants. I'm a former assistant district attorney. Judge Nichols is a former district attorney. We've worked on search warrants. We know the best time to do those things. We know there are protocols. I'm sure that people who are comfortable, middle-class, white-collar people might get upset about those kind of things, but that's the way search warrants are conducted. Most of the reports that I've seen show that it was done much more professionally than what you see written up in the right-wing media.
We want to talk about the future. If the GAB is dismantled and replaced with two separate commissions, both of them with partisans, what will be the impact on elections and ethics in the state of Wisconsin, in your opinion?
Well, I think timing is one big issue. You're going to see some fits and starts with the administration, as we talked about earlier. We've had a model for 40 years at the federal level, the Federal Election Commission, and you've seen it is a stalemate. We had the same model with the State Elections Board, which tilted one way or the other depending on it. It was bipartisan, but there was always, the governor's side always had an additional vote. We had a libertarian on there. And they've Didn't deadlock that often, but that's because of that tilt. But generally, when a partisan decision was made, that's where they took a lot of heat. If you go back and look at the kind of criticism that that board took, it was mostly when a decision was clearly a partisan to benefit someone else. And that's one of the things you expect. If you look at the performance of the Government Accountability Board, people on both sides weren't happy with some of those decisions, but the people, our primary customers, our local election officials, almost 2,000 of them, our state public officials with ethics statements, they have no clue what our partisanship is. They know that they can count on us for advice to help them comply with the law. And you don't hear those issues from our primary customers. You hear it brought up with someone who's unhappy with a high-level decision, and that happens on both sides of the aisle. I mean, what we see here really is simply retaliation for one decision that was made unanimously by the board members.
The John Doe.
Not the, well, the investigation that was linked to the John Doe.
Mm-hmm. Kevin Kennedy is the director of the Government Accountability Board. We appreciate your time. Thanks very much for being with us.
You're very welcome.
You bet. You've heard the arguments for and against it. Now tell us what you think. Do you think the GAB should be split into separate agencies led by partisan appointees? Tell us by liking and sharing Upfront on Facebook. Coming up next, the pressure on Paul Ryan. What Washington insiders are saying about the move to get him to run for Speaker.